So, hello.
Hello.
Can you say and spell your name, please?
It's Caleb Vanden Eynden, C-A-L-E-B. Last name's Vanden Eynden, V-A-N-D-E-N-E-Y-N-D-E-N.
Okay. So, with our story, we are trying to better understand the origins of funk and look at music history. We discussed the Great Migration, I think about all the different people that came to Dayton and the culture they brought, especially music culture. So, how did funk come to be?
In Dayton or just in general?
In Dayton.
Well, I know funk in general came from James Brown, and really he was the godfather of soul and the godfather of funk that kind of took R&B to the next level. And then in Dayton in the 1970s and 80s, everyone was very into the funk music scene, and everyone wanted to be just like James Brown and those bands growing up. But a lot of these students learned how to play their instruments in schools, in Dayton public schools, and they practiced, they got together, made bands after school, and started to write their own music.
So, in your paper, you discussed the 4 styles of funk. Can you tell me a little bit about each style?
Yeah, so that was one of the first things I did on my project was, funk's very hard to define. It is, as soon as you start to define it, you're gonna struggle to do it. But for the purpose of the paper and purpose of teaching, I felt like I had to narrow it down to define what those ingredients are. So I came up with 4 ingredients that what I feel like most funk music and Dayton funk music follows those ingredients. And the first one is instrumentation. And instrumentation is one of the most important aspects of this. It's about what instruments are being used. A lot of times you'll have your drummer, you'll have a bass, you'll have guitar, you'll also have lots of vocalists, you might have brass and saxophones and horns and things like that. So instrumentation is the big one on what actual instruments are in this ensemble that it makes up. The second one is form, and the form of the music is important because that is very different than our traditional pop song form that we have. You know, most songs now are verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. And with funk, it wasn't like that. There were, you would just call it the groove section or the A section. And you might groove on that section for 8 minutes before you switch to the next section of the piece. And it wasn't always defined like it is in most pop music it is today. What's the word I'm looking for? Deciphering the form of music was, I don't like that. Okay. So that's form. The third ingredient was groove, and that was probably the hardest to define, but Bootsy Collins and James Brown often talk about something called the one. And really all that is it just means beat one of the measure. Most music, there's 4 beats in a measure most of the time, and it's talking about beat one. And on beat one, you always want the drummer and the bass to be synced up. And whatever the bass player plays, he can play whatever he wants between beats 2 and 4, but on beat 1, he's got to play the root of the chord or the root of whatever key the song is in, and that keeps the bands on track. And the emphasis on the 1 was really important. A lot of songs, when you hear it, you're going to clap along to beats 2 and 4, and you do that in funk music as well, and that's part of the groove as well. So, in one of the analyses I did of funk music, you notice I wrote a line of music in there of the clap, and it's just clapping on beats 2 and 4. It's something that would be done in live crowds, and it's a big part of that art form is the crowd participation in the music. So there's the 1, and then there's that clap on beats 2 and 4, important in the groove, as well as so many other key elements to that. And then the 4th ingredient I talked about was lyrics and vocals. And I kind of use those interchangeably, but with vocals, there's the amount of vocalists that are used. It's not always just one vocalist singing. There's sometimes multiple vocalists. There might be crowd vocals. There might be someone who's the MC or the host. And you'll hear all those different voices. And there's also the style they sing with. Sometimes the words are chanted, the lyrics are chanted. Other times they're sung. Sometimes men will sing up in their falsettos. That's that higher register singing voice. And then the lyrics of funk music kind of go hand in hand with that. And really, there's three main keys to, or three main themes that we see in lyrics. And the first one, there's a lot of funk music about. Sorry, I'm like, it's a little, yeah, all right. So three main themes of lyrics, and the first one being love, or guys trying to woo a girl, like your classic love song, funk music. Another common theme was partying, or dancing, or kind of forget about the struggles of the day-to-day life and the kind of that blue-collar mentality, and just come and relax and have fun with us. And then a third theme I kept coming up as I listened to a lot of funk music was sometimes songs are just about funk. It's the only genre I've heard before that the genre of music actually sings about the music that they're playing in the moment. A James Brown song, "Make It Funky," is the only lyric in the whole song is "Make It Funky," but that song's all about the groove, and the lyrics and the vocals are just one element of it. It's not always the key. It's not always the key thing to look at in the performance.
Great, thank you so much for that. How did music education from the 50s and the clash of cultures that came in the 50s, like civil rights, in the 60s, create funk?
Yeah, so in Dayton, it came from, I told you it came from the schools, and it came from their band programs. And back in the 60s and 70s, the Dayton high schools had huge marching band programs that play at Friday night football games, and that was the big thing to do on Friday nights back then. And people would come out to see these bands, and people would learn instruments. Everyone wanted to be just like, basketball stars grow up to be, or basketball kids want to be LeBron James when they grow up. Kids would grow up listening to James Brown or all the musicians in his band, like Bootsy Collins, and they say, I want to be like him. And so they want their parent to buy them an instrument, and so they can get involved. We talked a little bit about the culture shift. You've probably learned a little bit about redlining and everything that happened in Dayton back then, as highways were built and jobs were moving into Dayton, that people started to move to the suburbs. The suburbs started to create, and that kind of left this primarily African American communities left in the city, and a lot of other people were moving to the suburbs. So there was this culture shift of people moving out, new people moving in, and the music kind of came out of that.
I know you already said this, but what is it about the lyrics of funk music that you noticed during your analysis?
About the lyrics?
Yeah. Is there something else that you talk about? Yeah.
Let's see. What else? I don't know. Maybe.
That's okay. Okay.
I don't want to repeat myself too much.
That's okay. What specific features of Dayton funk makes it different from other genres of music?
I think the community aspect of it. Dayton is, so much of Dayton funk is about Dayton and feels like it was written by the community for the community. A song that I thought of right away is "Fire" by the Ohio Players. It starts off with, you hear these sirens and street noises in the track, and that is supposed to resemble the street life of Dayton, of downtown Dayton, of these bands practicing on the streets and things like that. So I think the community aspect of everyone in the community knew these songs. All of these bands got famous because their songs were played on the local radio, and that's how people learned them. And they'd have big events, Battle of the Band sort of events back then that would be as big as the high school prom, where they would come out and they would listen to funk music. Montgomery County even set up a lot of those programs to get people out to listen to the music, helped keep people off the streets, kept people focused, and let them kind of pour all their energy out into something they're passionate about.
You talk about music in Dayton Public Schools in the 70s and 80s. How different was it, music education then to now?
It's changed a lot over the years. Back then, like I said, the bands were big. Everyone wanted to be a part of the band and grab a trumpet or trombone or saxophone or play on the drum line. And those marching bands really were kind of the draw to get people involved in music in the schools. Then there was a a big decline. They took music away from Dayton Public Schools, and they're slowly bringing it back. But I don't know if it'll ever be what it was back then. But in my experience talking to other people that grew up during that time, it was the music teachers that really were a big influence on them, that encouraged them to play instruments, write their own music, get together after school with their friends, and start their own band. What else did you ask?
How did it lead to the success of funk? Like Aaron did.
Same thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you interviewed 9 different people in your paper.
Yeah.
John Bell, David Webb being 2 of them. Through your conversations with them, what did you gather from the conversation about funk and how they preserve funk in Dayton?
David Webb is doing great things with the Funk Music Hall of Fame, and just by him starting that and showing recognition to all the people that did so well here in Dayton and beyond, that's a great way. And you notice a lot of community members coming out to support them and honor them. So everything he's done with that has gone a long way in preserving funk and telling people stories. And then Darren Bell, he's been fantastic. He's a great advocator of music education, and he's also in charge of the Dayton Funk All-Star Band. So the work that he does and just playing around locally at all the big events goes a long way into helping keep funk alive. And you also see it a lot nowadays in like Dayton Philharmonic. Did a program that featured Dayton Funk recently. DCDC, the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, features funk music a lot. University of Dayton's been hosting the last 2 Dayton Funk symposiums. And there's the Funk Revival concert in 2019 that they had. So all of those things are helping to preserve it.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the 2019 concert?
Yeah, that was great. It was a concert in 2019 hosted at the Rose Pavilion in Huber Heights, and it featured, Lakeside was there, Ohio Players, was Zapp and Roger, or the band Zapp was there, and it was originally put on to raise money for the community of Trotwood that lost so many houses in the hurricanes back in 2018 or 2019. I can't remember when that was. But it was there to raise money to and you saw that sense of community again that was prevalent back in the 70s and 80s and still is now, of everyone coming together to raise money to support that cause.
Okay, so moving on to the post-funk music industry, what does that mean, and how does it change? How has it changed? What changed in the 80s and 90s with that?
Yeah, funk evolved from R&B, and funk slowly turned into what was kind of rap right now. There was the rap era, and technology advanced a lot in the 80s and 90s, and with that we got new instruments and new sounds, and that ended up creating new opportunities to write and record music. And so in 80s and 90s, you start to see a lot more drum sampling occurring in songs. And there kind of became less of a need for live musicians. You no longer needed 12 people on stage to play a song. You could kind of narrow it down. You could have a computer do the drum part. You could have a MIDI keyboard do the bass part. And next thing you know, it became very individualized, and people could create funk music or music just on their own. And now you see that a lot nowadays. You see a lot of kids in college making music on their laptops in their dorm rooms. All of that kind of came from the advancement of technology. But with that, rap really started to emerge in the 90s, and it's always been that theme of that African American popular music that has stayed true, kind of from all the way back from the jazz era to the rap era, and to what we're in now. It's continued to change. Yeah.
There was a lot of sampling as well.
A lot of sampling, yep, and you still see that a lot nowadays, and especially like with technology, you're able to do that. And so when people are writing music nowadays and they really need a good groove or something that they've got lyrics written now, they want to find something to sing or rap it over, and they can just go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s and pull some of those famous tracks back then to get that authentic sound of the trumpets and the horns and the drum beat and the bass guitar and all of those things.
So what does funk revival mean, and how did it come to be?
The funk revival, I mean, I don't even really know when it started, because I kind of came in when it was happening. I got really into funk music at the first funk symposium because I was a student here at University of Dayton, and so when I saw that, that kind of got me into funk music. But I think the biggest thing is, what's the question again?
What does funk revival mean, and how did it come to be?
Funk revival, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know where it started. Someone's got a better answer. But to me, what I believe the funk revival really started was David Webb and what he's done with the Funk Museum. I think that brought it to everyone's attention because it was so big here in the 70s, 80s, 90s that as times change and times move on, people just sort of forget about it. They move on with their lives, and I don't think people may have realized back then how big of a deal it was that all these bands were coming out of Dayton. So when you start to think, oh my gosh, I haven't heard that song in years, or I can't believe there are people growing up in these schools that have no idea who the Ohio Players are, or who Lakeside is, or Heatwave, or Zap, and that it's such a huge part of the city's culture, not just the music culture, but a part of everyone's lives back in the 70s and 80s. It's, I think people realize how much they need to preserve this tradition of funk music, and if no one's doing that, it's going to eventually die out. So we need to keep it going. We need to teach other people about it. And like me and like a lot of us, probably, we came to the University of Dayton to go to college. I had no idea what was a mile up the road in downtown Dayton and what kind of culture was there.
So moving on to music education now. So what is the impact of social emotional learning, and what does the impact of social emotional learning do for teaching kids from different cultures, race, gender, like coronavirus?
Social emotional learning is so big right now in education. SEL is a big buzzword, and basically people are finally starting to realize we need to be teaching more than just the academics in school. And we've been doing that for a long time, and music education is a great example of that social emotional learning. We're not coming to music to learn, to learn and take tests all the time. We're coming to express ourselves. We're coming to be creative. And all of those experiences, from learning to play an instrument, learning how to write music, learning how to get on stage and perform in front of other people, those do so much for students' social emotional learning that make them better people that are going to contribute to society in the future. Nobody wants, it's great if you're book smart and can do, and can get straight A's and ace a test, but it's more than that. You want to be able to function in society, build relationships with people, and understand that social emotional side.
If you want to take a break, take a sip of
Yeah.
water. How's everyone else doing?
I like to get like tunnel vision.
You may just want
Yeah.
to start
Yes.
right now, because we're. Do you want to start and stop audio as well?
No.
All right.
Any feedback?
Oh, you're doing good.
Okay.
You're doing good.
Gosh.
No, you're running
It's like-
through these questions.
That was that Office quote of like, sometimes I start a sentence, I don't even know where it's going. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll like just start talking. I'm like, oh,
No, it's really
No,
great.
it is good.
cool.
You have good etiquette too, like you're not moving around too much.
Yeah, you
Oh,
went
good.
Like, you went like this once.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You gave me a high five to my ear.
Okay.
Alright.
I don't know how to say it, but what is funk pedagogy?
Pedagogy,
Pedagogy?
pedagogy is the same thing.
So what is that
Pedagogy.
in music education, and what is the three main objectives?
So the word pedagogy is basically, how to teach something. It's kind of the art of teaching. So funk pedagogy, that's really the word I use to come up with how I plan on teaching funk and what funk would look like in a secondary school band program's curriculum.
Okay. What are the three main objectives?
What did I what did I say? You have to remind me.
What have you been to?
Creativity, history, and the ingredients, right?
Yeah.
Something like.
I'll move on to the next one because this one's really interesting.
Well, I can talk about it. I just had to remind
Okay.
myself. All right, here we go. So when I was thinking about how to teach funk music, there were really three main things that I thought were important when I was teaching local Dayton high schools on the history of funk and the purpose of funk. And the first one was the ingredients of funk. Those are the four things I talked about earlier: instrumentation, form, groove, lyrics, and vocals. So that students can really understand the musicality side of funk, of why is funk music and what makes funk music, and why is it different than the music we might play regularly in band or in jazz band or marching band. I think the second big component you got to teach is the history. It doesn't really have as big of an impact if you don't talk about the history of Dayton and why all this music came to be. So everything we just talked about and everything you're going to get from your other interviewees, that is the history of Dayton funk. And then really that third aspect is the creativity side of funk, of being able to write music, being able to improvise a solo, and being able to take a song and maybe you take a funk groove or you take a funk song, but you make your own sort of arrangement of it, or you do it your way, or you add an element that is your special taste. So being able to add that creativity is really important in when you're teaching funk music.
What stood out to you when you were researching funk in Dayton?
Honestly, I couldn't believe all of it. Like when I first found out about it, I was just stunned at how much music and culture was in Dayton that so many of us have no idea even exists.
Being a music professor for elementary school kids, how important is music education for them and the community?
It's very important, kind of like I was talking about with the social emotional learning earlier. Just having music in schools and having it as a regular part of your week, to where you can go, you can express yourself, you can be yourself, you can sing, you can dance, you can write music, and be who you want to be, is so important to today's society, that sometimes we just need a break from the same old academic life. And no matter what school you're in, whatever capacity it is, any exposure to music is going to be beneficial for them.
So you talked about teaching in Springboro and working on teaching funk to students. Can you tell me more about the experience?
Yeah, that was really where I had my most experience teaching funk music to actual high school band students. And that was during my student teaching when I was a senior at UD. And I ended up doing it for my Ed TPA project. And if you're a teacher, you know all about Ed TPA. But I wanted to teach these lessons and teach funk songs to a high school. And so I worked with Springboro's high school jazz band for a couple months. And in those couple months, I taught them two main funk songs. And I talked about the history of Dayton. We talked about how funk came to be and why I was teaching it. But then it came time to do it. I wanted to take two songs that were in a funk style, and I took two James Brown songs, even though they're not from Dayton, but that's that funk style. And the first song was Papa's Got a Brand New Bag by James Brown, and it was a jazz band arrangement of it. So someone else had taken that song and wrote it out on sheet music and worked it so it would fit with a high school jazz band ensemble. And we learned how to play that, and we talked about the funk style, and the way the arrangement specifies that they're putting articulation markings and dynamic markings and notes and words and form and measure numbers to get you to play it the way similar to how James Brown played it. But after we had talked about the history of funk, we had learned that wasn't how musicians learned how to play that music back in the 70s and 80s. And so we said, why do we feel like we need to be tied to the sheet music? Why can't we learn it like they did back then? And then it unlocks this whole other dimension of learning music, and that's the aural side, the AURAL, the ear training, the aural side of learning music. And so we took, still with Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, we listened to a couple different versions of James Brown performing it live. We listened to a recorded version, we listened to some live versions, and we noticed that every time he performed it, it was a little bit different. Yeah, it's the same song, it's the same groove, it's the same lyrics, but sometimes he'd play the song and it would be 2 minutes long. Other times he'd play it and it'd be 8 minutes long. And so we talked about, well, how can he play the same song and it's not the exact same every time? And so we listened to the real version and one of the live versions. We found there was a solo section where the horns had a different background part than what was written in the arrangement that the jazz band students had. And so they ended up picking that up by ear and decided we're going to play it the way James Brown played it. And we kind of took that piece and we flipped it upside down and made our own version of it like they would have back then. And that was the first piece, just to compare and contrast the differences between the sheet music and how it actually was performed back then. And the second song I taught them was Make It Funky, also by James Brown. And for that one, I gave them no music whatsoever, and you should have seen the look on their faces. They're like, how do you expect me to play a song if you don't give me the music? And so we talked about I taught them a blues scale, and I said, if you can learn this blues scale, and we talked it out loud, then you know every note you need to know for Make It Funky. And then we listened to it, and they start to pick up on things. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm hearing that same lick over and over. Oh, they play it 3 times, and then they rest for 3 measures. They play for 3 measures, they rest for 3 measures. And I didn't even tell them to do anything. I'm just playing the recording. I see people on their trumpet and their saxophone, they just start playing along, trying to figure out what the notes are by ear. It was the coolest thing ever, because it surprised me too. And within an hour, we had learned the whole piece just by ear. Never saw music, we just heard it. And the lyrics were easy because you just chant "Make It Funky" over and over and over throughout the song. And like I talked about earlier, that the vocals weren't the draw of that piece. It was about the groove. It was about the solos. It was about the form of the piece. And so we worked out all the parts. We talked through it all. And I got a dry erase marker on the whiteboard, and we said, okay, we're going to play the A section, then we're going to play the B section. And we taught them a bridge, and we picked a few people that were going to try some solos. And we're like, okay, let's try it. And like within an hour they didn't even know the song existed an hour ago, we were able to play Make It Funky, but we just jammed. We started the song, and I didn't say when we're going to end. We just played, and we played, and we played, and we had a good time. Kids are hooting and hollering, and it was just a blast. And then COVID came in, and our concert got canceled. We never got to perform it, and so that was super sad. But I've got videos of them performing it that first day. That was something special to see. Kind of the light bulb go off in their head of like, oh, I can learn. I don't have to be tied to sheet music all the time. I can learn stuff on my own. And they were revising and editing their parts to be more of their style or what they want to do. And it was just something so cool to see that, if I was there longer and still doing that, we could have written our own song. We could have done our own thing. So, yeah.
So why is playing by ear important or fundamental?
Yeah, it's important. See, all the best musicians have a great ear. They have a great ear, and the concept of pitch is almost like a sixth sense of being able to understand pitch, your highs and your lows, and the relationship between notes, to be able to hear something and then to be able to play it. And that's a skill that if you're looking at sheet music all the time, you're not going to learn that. You're not going to learn that until you take the music away and just play, close your eyes, use your ear, and start to almost memorize the relation that these pitches have to one another. But playing by ear, it's one of the first things you learn to do as a music major in college. You take your aural skills and your music theory classes, and you start to learn about the inner workings of music and pitch. And that's one thing that is often missing from a lot of school music curriculums is that ability to do things with your ear. And we're so focused on teaching people how to read music. This is what a chord note is. This is what an F is on the music staff, that we need to sometimes take a step back and be able to explain and let kids experiment on their own with their ear. And
that's what a lot of funk musicians did in the past.
Right, exactly. That's what funk musicians did, and back then, some could read music, others couldn't read music as well. But at the end of the day, you got to find a way to put on a show for a Friday night football game at a marching band, and you're not going to teach someone how to read music overnight. You can try, but it's not going to happen. But teaching someone to play a groove by ear, you can teach that. I could teach that to you or anybody right now, to get you to play a groove in 5 minutes, and you'll be jamming, you'll be making music.
So, how do educators like you teach funk music to diverse student populations in a way that's both relevant and culturally appropriate?
I think when teaching funk music, you need to approach it as a way of, this was the music of those people and of that culture in the 70s and 80s in Dayton. And, I'm not trying, when I'm teaching funk music, I'm not trying to get, yes, I want them to fall in love with Dayton funk music and have an appreciation for the history, but I'm not going out there saying, this is the only music you can play, this is the best music, or anything like that. I think what it shows is you need to teach the relationship that student back in the 70s and 80s had with that music. They idolized people like James Brown, and that just like we idolize sports stars right now, they wanted to grow up to be like him. They wanted to learn like him. And so finding that connection with students nowadays and say, hey, what is it that gets you going? What is it that you're passionate about? What music are you passionate about? What interests and topics are you into that you want to explore deeper and put your own spin on it and make it your own?
How can we find ways to improve music education within our city in Dayton?
Hire great teachers. That's a big one. We need great teachers who are passionate about this, and we need people who are involved in that funk scene to keep doing what they're doing. Get out, reach out to schools. As someone who works in schools, we are always so excited when someone wants to come in, especially someone local who grew up in the area, to come in and share their story and share what they love so much about their community. That is so big, and of course funding is a big issue. One of the biggest setbacks back in the day was whether or not a kid's parent could afford an instrument, and so there's a lot of hand-me-down instruments and things that get passed around so that people can play, but schools need equipment. Just like we need textbooks and paper and pencils for the school day, just like we're buying Chromebooks now for students, we need instruments, and we need music, we need resources, and we need to be able to have the funding to bring people in to tell us what they're passionate about.
So throughout the documentary, we ponder whether funk is still relevant, and so do you think funk is dead?
No, I don't think funk is dead. No.
What do you think is helping funk stay alive in Dayton?
I think it's things like this, people that are still telling their stories and people that are still taking an interest in it.
What do you think the future of funk music in Dayton looks like?
I'm not sure, and we'll see. I think it's important to know that music from the 70s and 80s, that is always going to be music from the 70s and 80s, and I think one of the best ways we can preserve that or honor it is not just to play the music and listen to the music, but is to have that inspire us to do our own thing, to create our own music, to create our own voice.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay.
Sorry, I want you to look at her.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What challenges has Dayton funk community faced?
I know as people grow up, people are moving out, and sometimes, frankly, a lot of the people that grew up in that era and were so big and important influences in Dayton funk culture are passing away. And sometimes, it's sad, but sometimes you don't want the story to die with them, but sometimes it's just a reality. People move away, people grow up, people get different interests. There's something new on the news that, there's something new in pop culture that we focus our attention on that sometimes it gets left behind.
How do we, is that what you want to say? How did it overcome these challenges? How do we overcome these challenges?
But by doing things like this, by continuing to teach these things in schools, by educating the educators who are in schools now, bring them together and talk about how great this can be, and by doing projects like mine where you can actually get into schools and work with students and see those see their faces light up, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Alright. What's the difference between Dayton funk and funk in other places?
I feel like I talked about that a little bit. I think what makes Dayton funk unique is that it is for the community, and it comes from the community, and Dayton was almost like a little bubble back in the 70s and 80s of everyone here kind of got the funk bug that everyone was doing it, and it was cool to be in a funk band, and I don't know.
Where does funk come from? Or what do you think funk comes from the research? Like, what do you think?
I think funk comes from the evolution of African American popular music. Like I said, jazz slowly turned over the ages. Jazz turned into R&B and soul, and that later turned into funk music by taking that R&B flavor and adding funk grooves to it, and changing up the instrumentation and the vocals a little bit. And really, James Brown was the one that paved the way for that new style of music.
And if you could you list the 4 important themes of funk in a row?
4 important themes.
Yeah, I think the very beginning.
Oh, the ingredients of
Yeah,
funk.
the ingredients.
Yeah, I came up with 4 ingredients of funk, and those were instrumentation, the form, the groove, and then the lyrics and vocals.